The sterile white walls of the ICU at Lenox Hill Hospital were closing in. For Olivia Dubois, every beep of the heart monitor was a countdown, not just to the birth of her twins, but to her own possible death. She was fighting a battle against her own body, a battle the doctors weren't sure she could win. She was alone, terrified, and clinging to the hope of meeting the children she had loved more than life itself. She had no idea that miles away, the man who put them there, billionaire Preston Whitmore, was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of New York high society, a bomb that would shatter lives, expose a web of lies, and prove that for the ultra-rich, even the miracle of birth is just another asset in a hostile takeover. What happens when a mother's desperate fight for life collides with a billionaire's ruthless quest for a legacy? The answer is more shocking than you can ever imagine. The pain was a white-hot wave, cresting with an intensity that stole the air from Olivia Dubois's lungs. It wasn't the rhythmic, purposeful pain of normal labor she had read about in books. This was a chaotic, jagged agony, accompanied by a blinding headache that made the fluorescent lights of the hospital room pulse like malevolent stars. Blood pressure is 190/110. A nurse's voice cut through the fog. It was calm, but taut like a wire stretched to its breaking point. She's barely responsive. Dr. Matthews, we're losing our window. Olivia tried to focus on the voice to anchor herself to it. She was 32 years old, an art curator with a modest but happy life that had been turned upside down 9 months ago. Now in this sterile, beeping room that life felt like a distant dream. The only reality was the rebellion happening inside her own body. Severe preeclampsia, they called it. A storm of hypertension and organ failure that was trying to kill her before she could even meet her children. Her hand, slick with sweat, gripped the bedrail. The babies. She rasped, her voice a fragile whisper. Are my babies okay? A kind face framed by graying hair and tired eyes leaned over her. Dr. Matthews. They're in distress, Olivia. Their heart rates are dropping with every contraction. We need to get them out, now. We need to perform an emergency C-section. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the haze of pain. A C-section. She had wanted a natural birth to feel her children enter the world, but that was a luxury she no longer had. Okay, she breathed. Whatever it takes. Just save them. We're going to save all of you, Dr. Matthews said, but her eyes betrayed a professional uncertainty that terrified Olivia more than any blunt admission of risk. As they began to prep her wheeling in machines that beeped and whirred with new urgency, Olivia's mind drifted to him. Preston Whitmore. The man whose name was a titan in the world of finance, whose face graced the cover of Forbes, and whose touch had once felt like coming home. They had met at a gallery opening. She was explaining the nuances of a postmodern sculpture. He had cut through the art world pretense with a disarmingly direct question and a smile that could have melted glaciers. It was a whirlwind romance lived in the secret hours between his board meetings and her gallery installations. He had been charming, brilliant, and intoxicatingly attentive. He never spoke of his public life, of the statuesque brunette Victoria Carrington, who was always draped on his arm in the society pages. Olivia foolishly had allowed herself to believe his vague promises of a future, of a time when things would be simpler. The discovery of her pregnancy had been a shock, but a joyous one. She had envisioned telling him seeing that brilliant smile and finally starting the life he'd hinted at. But his reaction was not a smile. It was a mask of cold, calculated panic. The whirlwind stopped. The calls became infrequent, then non-existent. Finally, a lawyer had appeared with a check and a non-disclosure agreement. She had torn them both in half. This wasn't about money. It was about a father and his children. Now, as the anesthesiologist's needle pricked her spine, a single tear traced a path down her temple. She wasn't just alone. She had been erased. Her best friend, Jenna Kowalski, squeezed her hand, her knuckles white. Jenna, a no-nonsense public defender who had been Olivia's rock, had eyes blazing with a fury that Olivia was too weak to feel. "I tried calling his office again," Jenna muttered, her voice low and venomous. "Got his little pit bull of a secretary," said Mr. Whitmore was in an unavoidable all-day series of meetings. Unavoidable. While you're in here fighting for your life. And his. "Don't, Jenna," Olivia whispered. "He doesn't matter right now." But he did. As the numbing cold spread through the lower half of her body, Olivia couldn't help but think of the irony. Preston Whitmore, the man who controlled empires, who could move markets with a single word, was utterly absent from the one event that would define his legacy more than any business deal. His children were fighting their way into a world that their father refused to acknowledge, and their mother was fading. "Olivia, can you hear me?" Mr. Matthews's voice was urgent. "We're starting now. Stay with us." A blue curtain went up, blocking her view. Olivia stared at the ceiling at the water stains that looked like distant, indifferent constellations. The beeping of the monitor beside her quickened a frantic electronic heartbeat counting down the seconds of her life. She closed her eyes and prayed not for herself, but for the two tiny souls about to be born into a storm. While Olivia fought for breath in the antiseptic chaos of Lenox Hill, Preston Whitmore sat in a sterile environment of a different kind. The boardroom on the 80th floor of the Whitmore Global Tower was a masterpiece of minimalist power. A single slab of black marble served as a table surrounded by chairs of chrome and black leather. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sprawled below a concrete kingdom he ruled. Preston, at 45, was handsome in a severe, sculpted way. His dark hair was threaded with distinguished silver at the temples, and his eyes, the color of slate, missed nothing. Today, they were fixed on the dozen board members before him, his expression unreadable. "The quarterly projections are unacceptable," he stated, his voice calm, but carrying the chilling weight of absolute authority. "The logistics division is bleeding profits. Heads will roll. See to it." There were nervous nods and the rustling of papers. No one argued with Preston Whitmore. His grandfather had built this empire from scrap metal and sheer will, and his father had expanded it into a global behemoth. Preston had inherited their ruthlessness, but honed it with a modern technological precision. He treated business like a war, and he had never lost. Beside him sat Victoria Carrington. She was the perfect corporate consort, impeccably dressed in a crimson dress that cost more than a car, her blonde hair styled into a flawless chignon. She held a tablet, ostensibly taking notes, but her real role was ornamental. She was the future Mrs. Whitmore, a fixture in his public life, a beautiful, well-bred woman from a family with old money and even older connections. Theirs was a union of dynasties, a merger of power and influence. It was a transaction, and both parties understood the terms. The meeting concluded. As the board members filed out their relief palpable, Preston turned to Victoria. "You were quiet today," he observed, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. "I was admiring your command of the room, darling," she said, her smile perfectly polished. "You eviscerated poor Mr. Henderson without even raising your voice." He gave a non-committal grunt and looked out at the city. his city. But a shadow hung over his kingdom, a threat more potent than any market downturn. It was a ghost from the past, a clause written in fading ink. "Davies is on his way up." "Preston," said his tone shifting, becoming colder. Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Mr. Davies was Preston's personal lawyer, a man who handled the things that couldn't be recorded in board meeting minutes. He was a creature of shadows and ironclad contracts. "Something wrong?" she asked, a sliver of anxiety in her voice. "Just tying up a loose end?" The loose end was Olivia Dubois, a complication he thought he had handled. A beautiful, intelligent, infuriatingly principled woman who had refused to be bought. He had allowed a rare moment of personal indulgence to spiral into a catastrophic liability. When his investigators had informed him of her high-risk pregnancy with twins, the panic he felt was not emotional, but strategic. Mr. Davies entered a thin, spectral man in a gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He nodded curtly at Victoria before turning his full attention to Preston. Sir Davies began. "There's a development. Ms. Dubois was admitted to Lenox Hill Hospital 3 hours ago. Severe preeclampsia. The prognosis is guarded." Preston's jaw clenched. The timeline was accelerating. "And the children, she's in labor. They're preparing for an emergency C-section as we speak." Victoria, who had been watching the exchange, finally spoke, her voice laced with a confusion she couldn't conceal. "Preston, what is he talking about? Who is this woman?" Preston ignored her, his slate-gray eyes locked on his lawyer. "The deadline is my 46th birthday. That's in 2 months. According to the Whitmore Legacy Charter, I must have a legitimate blood-related heir publicly acknowledged by that date, or controlling interest of the company transfers to the charitable trust. My grandfather's final sentimental folly. It was the secret sword of Damocles that had hung over his head his entire life. His grandfather, a man who valued family legacy above all, had inserted the clause to prevent his empire from ever falling into the hands of an outsider or a childless, career-obsessed successor. He had to produce an heir. Victoria's face had gone pale. "An heir, Preston? We've been trying. You know that. My doctor said we just need more time." Her voice was a desperate plea. Their attempts to conceive had been a series of clinical, passionless encounters, another item on their shared agenda that had yet to yield a return on investment. Preston finally turned to her, his expression devoid of any warmth. "Time is a luxury we no longer have. Your doctor has been feeding you false hope for a year, Victoria. I had you investigated 6 months ago. You're infertile, a fact you conveniently failed to mention before our engagement." The perfectly constructed facade of Victoria Carrington shattered. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The crimson dress suddenly seemed garish, her flawless makeup a grotesque mask. You investigated me," she whispered, horrified. "I investigate everything," Preston said flatly. "This woman, Olivia Dubois, is carrying my children, my heirs. Davies, you are to go to that hospital. Offer her whatever she wants, a life of unimaginable luxury for her and her family, the best medical care money can buy. In return, she will sign a contract. She will list the father as anonymous hand over full parental rights to me upon their birth, and then she will disappear. And if she refuses," Davies asked, his pen poised over a notepad. Preston Whitmore walked back to the window, placing his hands on the cool glass. He looked down at the city, at the thousands of lives scurrying below like ants, each with their own dramas, their own heartbreaks, none of which mattered. "Then you remind her," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, a sound more menacing than any shout. that fighting me will be far more painful than anything the doctors are putting her through. You make her understand that she can either give me my children, or I will take them, and I will leave her with nothing." Victoria let out a choked sob. She was not just being replaced, she was being liquidated. Her entire purpose in this carefully constructed merger had been rendered obsolete. She was a failed asset. Preston didn't even look at her. His eyes were on the distant spot on the Upper East Side, where Lenox Hill Hospital stood. His legacy was being born, and he would secure it. No matter the cost. No matter the collateral damage. The hallway outside the neonatal intensive care unit was a limbo of hushed anxiety. Soft chimes from the nursery, the quiet hum of ventilators, the muted footsteps of nurses. It was the soundtrack of fragile hope. Jenna Kowalski sat on a hard plastic chair, her head in her hands, a disposable coffee cup, grown cold on the floor beside her. The C-section had been a success, if one could call it that. 2 tiny babies, a boy and a girl, had been pulled from the brink. They were premature, whisked away to the NICU in a flurry of tubes and plastic boxes before Olivia could even see them. But Olivia herself had not fared as well. She had hemorrhaged on the table. They'd stabilized her, but she was weak, sedated, and drifting in and out of consciousness in a recovery room. The storm inside her had passed, but it had left devastation in its wake. A man in an impeccably tailored gray suit approached his polished shoes, making no sound on the linoleum floor. He had the unnerving stillness of a predator. "Ms. Kowalski?" he asked. His voice was dry, like rustling paper. Jenna looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, but instantly wary. "Who's asking?" "My name is Arthur Davies. I represent Preston Whitmore. I'm here to speak with Ms. Dubois." Jenna shot to her feet, her 5'4" frame bristling with the ferocity of a cornered animal. "You have got to be kidding me. You and your soulless boss have the audacity to show up now." She almost died. She is in no condition to speak to anyone, especially not a corporate ghoul. Davies remained impassive, his expression unchanging. "My client has a vested interest in the health of Ms. Dubois and the assets. He is prepared to make a very generous offer to ensure their long-term well-being." "Assets," Jenna's voice rose, cracking with disbelief. "You're calling 2 beautiful, tiny babies assets. Get the hell out of here before I have security throw you out." "That would be unwise, Ms. Kowalski," Davies said smoothly, opening his briefcase. He produced a file. "My client is also prepared to assume all of Ms. Dubois's medical debt. In fact, he is prepared to transfer her to a private suite with a team of the world's best specialists, effective immediately." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. All she has to do is listen to the terms. Jenna was a public defender. She knew the language of power and coercion. This was a threat wrapped in the guise of a gift. She looked down the hall towards Olivia's room. Her friend was weak, vulnerable, and facing a mountain of medical bills that would crush her. As much as she loathed it, she knew she couldn't turn him away without at least hearing the poison he was selling. 5 minutes, she snarled. "And I'll be in the room the entire time. You say one word to upset her and I'll break your nose." Davies offered a thin, reptilian smile. "Understood." Olivia was awake, barely. The world swam in and out of focus. She could feel a dull, throbbing pain across her abdomen and an exhaustion so profound it felt like it was in her bones. She saw Jenna enter, followed by a man who seemed to suck all the warmth from the room. "Olivia." "Honey," Jenna said softly, taking her hand. This man is here from Preston." Olivia's heart, already taxed, gave a painful flutter. She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness pushed her back down. Davies stepped forward, placing a leather-bound folder on her bedside table. Ms. Dubois, my name is Arthur Davies. On behalf of Mr. Whitmore, I want to first extend his relief that you and the children are stable. The words were hollow, recited from a script. He sent his lawyer, Olivia whispered the hurt fresh and sharp. He sent a solution, Davies corrected. Mr. Whitmore is prepared to offer you a settlement that will guarantee your financial security for the rest of your life. He will establish a trust fund of $50 million in your name. He will purchase a home for you in any city you choose. He will cover all medical expenses for you and your parents indefinitely. He will ensure you never have to worry about money again. Olivia stared at him, her mind struggling to process the astronomical numbers. It was a king's ransom. It was also an insult. In exchange for what she asked, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. Davies opened the folder. In exchange for your signature on these documents, they are a standard parental rights relinquishment agreement. You will cede full and exclusive custody of the children hereafter referred to as the heirs to Mr. Whitmore. Their birth certificates will list him as the sole parent. You will agree to a permanent, legally binding non-disclosure and no-contact order. In essence, you will walk away and allow him to raise his children as he sees fit. The room went silent, save for the steady beep of Olivia's monitor. Jenna looked like she was about to physically assault Davies. Olivia felt a cold dread wash over her, a feeling worse than the pain, worse than the fear she'd felt during the delivery. He wasn't just abandoning her. He was trying to purchase her children to erase her from their lives, as if she were nothing more than a vessel. No, she said the word small, but solid. Davies seemed unfazed. Ms. Dubois, perhaps you aren't appreciating the reality of your situation. You are unemployed. You have no savings. You are facing hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills. You will be raising 2 premature infants alone. Your life will be a constant struggle. They are my children. Olivia said, her voice trembling but firm. They are not for sale. Mr. Whitmore is their father. He has a right to them. And he has the resources to give them a life you can only dream of. The best schools, the best opportunities, an inheritance worth billions. What can you offer them? A tiny apartment and a life of mediocrity. Is your selfish pride worth sacrificing their future? Jenna stepped forward. That's enough. Get out. Davies ignored her, his eyes fixed on Olivia. Think carefully, Ms. Dubois. If you refuse this offer, Mr. Whitmore will be forced to pursue custody through the courts. He will hire the most ruthless legal team in the country. They will dredge up every detail of your life. They will paint you as an unstable, unfit gold digger who entrapped a wealthy man. They will bankrupt you. They will break you. And in the end, he will win. He always wins. This contract is your only chance to walk away with anything other than pain and debt. He tapped the folder. The offer is on the table. You have 24 hours to sign. After that, the war begins. He turned and walked out, leaving the leather folder on the bedside table like a coiled snake. Jenna rushed to Olivia's side. Don't listen to him, Liv. He's a monster. We'll fight him. But Olivia was staring at the folder, the weight of his threat settling upon her. She had just fought a battle for her life. Now, weak and broken, she was being thrust into another one. A war against a man with infinite resources and zero morality. A war for the souls of her children. The beep of the heart monitor seemed to mock her, a steady, indifferent rhythm in the face of an impossible choice. The next 24 hours were a crucible. Olivia's physical recovery was slow and agonizing. Every movement sent a searing pain through her abdomen. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, administering medication, their professional sympathy, a thin balm on an open wound. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the storm raging in her mind. The leather folder sat on her table, a silent, malevolent presence. Davies's words echoed in her ears, "He will break you." Jenna had been a whirlwind of righteous fury. She'd spent hours on the phone with legal aid contacts, mentors, and anyone who would listen. The consensus was grim. "They're right about one thing," Liv Jenna had admitted, her voice heavy with defeat, as she sat by Olivia's bed late that night. "A custody battle would be brutal. Preston will use his money to bury us in motions and delays. It could drag on for years. They'll portray you exactly as Davies said, so I'm supposed to just give them up," Olivia asked, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Pretend they never existed, take his blood money and live with a hole in my heart for the rest of my life." "No, of course not," Jenna said quickly. "I'm just saying, we need to be smart. We need a strategy. But what strategy was there against a god?" The only moments of peace came when the nurses allowed her to be wheeled to the NICU. Seeing her children even through the clear plastic of their isolettes was like a jolt of life. They were so impossibly small, their tiny chests rising and falling with the help of machines. The boy whom she'd decided to name Noah had a tuft of dark hair just like Preston's. The girl Sophie had long, delicate fingers that curled and uncurled in her sleep. As she watched them, a fierce, primal protectiveness washed over her, eclipsing the fear and the pain. These were not assets or heirs. They were her son and her daughter. They were a part of her. Preston saw them as the next chapter in the Whitmore dynasty. She saw the curve of Sophie's ear the way Noah's brow furrowed when he dreamed. He wanted to own them. She just wanted to love them. It was during one of these visits, her hand resting gently on the top of Noah's isolette, feeling the faint warmth through the plastic that her resolve hardened into steel. "They will break you. Let them try." They thought she was weak, a poor, helpless artist they could bully and buy. They had mistaken her kindness for fragility. They didn't understand the strength of a mother. When she was wheeled back to her room, she looked at the folder, then at Jenna. "Call him?" "Olivia," said her voice clear and steady for the first time in days. "Liv, what are you doing?" Jenna asked, alarmed. "Call the lawyer. Tell him I want to see Preston, not his messenger boy. Him, in person. I will give him my answer directly." Jenna hesitated, then saw the look in Olivia's eyes. It was a look she'd never seen before, not of fear or despair, but of cold, hard defiance. She nodded and stepped out to make the call. An hour later, Preston Whitmore walked into the room. He was dressed in a dark, bespoke suit, looking utterly out of place in the humble hospital room. He exuded an aura of power and impatience, as if the very air he was breathing was beneath him. He dismissed Jenna with a curt nod, leaving them alone. He stood at the foot of her bed, his slate-gray eyes appraising her with the same detached coolness he used on a balance sheet. "You wanted to see me," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Olivia said, pushing herself up slightly against the pillows. She met his gaze without flinching. "I wanted to look you in the eye when I told you my answer." "I trust you've made the logical choice," he said, gesturing towards the folder. "It's the best outcome for everyone." "Best for you, you mean?" she countered, her voice quiet, but ringing with conviction. "You want to slot them into your perfect life like a new acquisition. You want to give them everything money can buy except the one thing they'll ever truly need. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. Don't lecture me on parenting. This is about their future. This is about your ego, your legacy. It has nothing to do with them. You haven't even asked their names. He fell silent. The question hung in the air, a stark indictment of his detachment. Their names are Noah and Sophie, Olivia said softly. And they are the only legacy that matters to me. So no, Preston. I won't sign your papers. I won't take your money. I won't disappear. He stared at her, a muscle working in his jaw. He had expected tears pleading or a desperate attempt to negotiate a higher price. He had not expected this quiet, unshakable defiance. You are making a grave mistake, he said, his voice dropping to that dangerously low tone. You are choosing a life of poverty and struggle for them all because of your own selfish pride. No, Olivia corrected him. I am choosing a life of love for them. You think money is strength. You're wrong. Strength is holding your son's hand while he's hooked up to a ventilator. Strength is fighting for your life so you can hear your daughter cry for the first time. You know nothing about strength. You only know power. She picked up the folder. Her hands trembled with effort, but she held it firmly. With a deliberate, forceful movement, she ripped it in half, the sound of tearing paper echoing in the silent room. She then tore it again and again, letting the pieces of the devil's bargain flutter onto the white blanket. My answer is no, she said, her chest heaving with exertion and emotion. These are my children, and if you want them, you'll have to go through me. And I promise you, Preston, I will not break. For the first time, Preston Whitmore looked genuinely taken aback. He saw not the pliable artist he had briefly dated, but a woman transformed, forged into something new and formidable in the fires of childbirth and betrayal. He stared at the torn pieces of his perfectly crafted solution, then back at her. Without another word, he turned and strode out of the room, his footsteps echoing his silent fury. The war was on. But as Olivia sank back into her pillows, exhausted but resolute, she knew something he didn't. He was fighting for an empire. She was fighting for her world. Preston Whitmore did not become a titan of industry by accepting defeat. Olivia's defiance was not a setback. It was simply a change in battlefield tactics. If she would not surrender in private, he would force a victory in public. His deadline for the Whitmore legacy clause was ticking, and sentiment had no place in strategy. 2 days later, the sterile quiet of Lenox Hill Hospital was shattered. A fleet of black SUVs descended upon the main entrance like a carrion of crows. Doors opened, and out stepped Preston Whitmore. But he was not alone. On his arm, looking pale but composed, was Victoria Carrington. Her presence was a calculated move, a signal of a united front. Behind them, a swarm of reporters and photographers tipped off by an anonymous source, surged forward flashes, popping questions being shouted like artillery fire. Mr. Whitmore, is it true there's a personal matter bringing you here today? Victoria, what are your thoughts on the rumors, Preston? Held up a hand, and an obedient silence fell over the clamoring press. His personal security team, large men in dark suits with earpieces, formed a perimeter, creating a small bubble of calm in the media tempest. Ladies and gentlemen, Preston began, his voice resonant and commanding easily, carrying over the city noise. My family and I have always valued our privacy. However, recent events and the circulation of malicious rumors compel me to set the record straight. He paused for dramatic effect, his gaze sweeping over the reporters. He looked at Victoria, who managed a fragile smile for the cameras. It was a masterful piece of theater. Inside, Jenna was watching the spectacle unfold on the waiting room television, her blood running cold. "Oh my God, Liv, you need to see this," she said, running back to Olivia's new private room, a courtesy upgrade the hospital administration had mysteriously provided that morning. Olivia, who was slowly regaining her strength, watched the screen with a growing sense of dread. What was he doing? On the television, Preston continued. Victoria and I have been on a long and difficult journey to start a family. A journey many of you can understand. Due to medical complications, we made the decision to pursue surrogacy. A collective gasp went through the press corps. Victoria's hand tightened on Preston's arm. Her face was a mask of practiced grace, but her eyes were wide with shock and confusion. This was clearly not part of the script she had been given. "We found a wonderful, selfless woman to help us," Preston went on, his voice imbued with a fraudulent sincerity. "And I am overjoyed to announce that 2 days ago she gave birth to my children, a healthy boy and girl." Jenna let out a string of curses. "He's painting you as a surrogate. He's erasing you from the story in front of the entire world." Olivia felt the air leave her lungs. It was a move of such breathtaking cruelty and genius that she couldn't even process it. He wasn't going to fight her in court. He was going to nullify her claim in the court of public opinion. She would be just the womb for hire, easily dismissed and paid off. Unfortunately, Preston set his face a mask of solemn concern. There were some complications following the birth, and our surrogate remains in the hospital to recover. We are, of course, ensuring she receives the absolute best care. But today is not about the challenges. It's about the future. It's about celebrating the arrival of the next generation of the Whitmore family. He was creating a narrative so powerful and public that any attempt by Olivia to contradict it would make her look like a liar, an extortionist trying to capitalize on her role. She would be David against a Goliath who owned the quarry and manufactured the stones. "Mr. Whitmore, what are the names of the children?" a reporter shouted. Preston smiled a warm, paternal smile that he had practiced in the mirror. "We have not finalized them yet. We want to spend some time with them first. But I can assure you they are the heirs to everything I have built." He looked directly into the main camera, his slate-gray eyes seeming to pierce through the screen. It was a direct message to his board of directors, to the trustees of his grandfather's will. The deadline had been met. The legacy was secure. Then he turned to the hospital entrance. "And now, if you'll excuse us, my fiancé and I are going to see our children." The security team parted the sea of reporters, and Preston, with Victoria in tow, swept into the hospital lobby, leaving a stunned and frenzied press in their wake. Victoria was stumbling slightly, her arm locked in his, her mind clearly reeling from the public declaration of a surrogacy she knew nothing about. She was a prop in his play, and she was only just now realizing her role. Upstairs in her room, Olivia stared at the blank television screen, the broadcast having moved on. The world had just been told she was a vessel, a temporary incubator. Her identity as a mother had been stolen in a 3-minute press conference. The war she had prepared for, a war of lawyers and courtrooms, was over before it began. Preston Whitmore had launched a preemptive nuclear strike, and she was standing at ground zero. The elevator ride to the maternity ward was silent and suffocating. Victoria Carrington felt as though she were in a nightmare. Surrogacy. The word echoed in her head. All their clinical failed attempts, all her private tears of frustration and shame he had known. He had known she was infertile, and had let her go on believing, planning, playing the part of the future mother and wife, all while he had another woman carrying his children. She was not his partner. She was his cover story. When the elevator doors opened, Preston strode out, his focus absolute. He was heading for the NICU. Victoria, however, stopped dead in the middle of the hallway. "Preston," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. He turned a flicker of irritation in his eyes. "Not now, Victoria. We have an audience." He gestured vaguely towards the nurses and doctors who were trying and failing to look inconspicuous. "You lied to me," she whispered, her perfectly manicured composure finally beginning to crack. "You stood there in front of the world and you lied. You humiliated me." "I secured our future," he corrected her coldly. "This solves everything. The legacy clause, the succession. The company is safe. Our position is safe." "Your position," she hissed, her voice rising. "This was never about us. It was always about you. I was just a placeholder, a pretty piece of window dressing until your real heirs arrived." A few nurses stopped and stared openly now. This was better than any daytime soap opera. "Keep your voice down," Preston warned, his jaw tight. "You are overwrought. We will discuss this at home." "There is no we," Victoria cried, the sound raw and broken. The humiliation was a physical force churning in her stomach. She thought of the society events, the charity balls where she had spoken of their future family. She thought of the nursery she had been designing in their shared penthouse, a monument to a fantasy he had allowed her to build. It was all a lie. Her entire life for the past 2 years had been an elaborate, cruel deception. "I stood by you," she sobbed, tears finally breaking free. Carving black mascara trails down her pale cheeks. "I defended you. I built my entire life around you for what? To be your prop in a press conference, to be the barren fiancé standing by while you introduce the children you had with some curator." The word hung in the air. A nurse gasped. The secret was out. Preston's face for the first time turned to thunder. He had miscalculated. He had assumed Victoria's ambition and her dependence on him would keep her in line. He had underestimated the power of a woman's public humiliation. "You've said enough," he snarled, taking a step towards her, grabbing her arm. "Don't you touch me!" she shrieked, yanking her arm away. And then it happened. The carefully constructed world of Victoria Carrington built on lies and ambition, and Chanel came crashing down. The shock, the betrayal, the public shame, it was too much. Her eyes rolled back in her head. Her body suddenly limp, swayed for a moment, and then with a soft, final sigh, she collapsed onto the polished hospital floor. Chaos erupted. "We need a doctor," someone yelled. Nurses rushed forward. Preston stood frozen for a second, staring down at the crumpled form of his fiancée in her crimson dress. This was not part of the plan. This was messy, uncontrolled. His perfect media moment was turning into a public relations disaster. From down the hall, Olivia's door opened. Jenna, having heard the commotion, poked her head out. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene, Victoria unconscious on the floor, nurses swarming, and Preston Whitmore looking not like a triumphant father but like a cornered animal. He saw her. His eyes met Jenna's, and in them she saw a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. He had wanted a clean victory. Instead, he had a circus. As the medical team loaded Victoria onto a gurney, a reporter who had snuck past security rounded the corner, his phone camera held high, capturing the entire sordid scene. The flash went off, illuminating the billionaire, the mistress, and the complete and utter implosion of his carefully laid plans. Preston's declaration had been a success. He had publicly claimed his heirs. But in doing so, he had lit a fuse. Now, standing in the wreckage, watching his pristine narrative burn to the ground, he realized his war was far from over. It had just entered a new, far more public and far more dangerous phase. And the woman he had tried to erase, the mother of his children, was just down the hall, watching it all burn. The collapse of Victoria Carrington was not a quiet implosion. It was a detonation. The photo snapped by the rogue reporter was a masterpiece of spontaneous, brutal art. It captured Preston frozen in his bespoke suit, a look of cold fury on his face as he stared down at the heap of crimson silk and shattered dreams that was his fiancée. It wasn't just a picture. It was a narrative. The triumphant patriarch revealed as a cold-blooded tyrant. Within an hour, the hashtag Whitmore collapse was trending globally. Victoria awoke not to the scent of roses, but to the sharp antiseptic smell of a different hospital room and the burning, acrid taste of humiliation. The fog of her panic attack receded, replaced by an icy, diamond-hard clarity. She had been his most valuable asset, the perfect partner for a merger of dynasties, and he had liquidated her in a public forum without a second thought. She looked at her phone. Dozens of missed calls from her parents' friends, and a single terse text from Preston's office. Do not speak to anyone. Wait for instruction. Instruction. She let out a laugh that was half sob, half snarl. She was done taking instructions. She pressed the call button for the nurse. Please get me my handbag, she said, her voice devoid of its usual polished warmth, replaced by something metallic and sharp. And find out the name of the best divorce attorney in New York City. Then get me the direct line for Ronan Blake at the New York Ledger. The nurse, wide-eyed, scurried out. Victoria was no longer a victim. She was a woman scorned, and she was about to become the most credible, most damning, and most beautifully vengeful source the tabloid world had ever seen. While Victoria sharpened her knives, Preston was in his war room on the 80th floor, the city lights twinkling below like a galaxy he no longer fully controlled. The stock ticker on his screen was a river of blood red. WGT Whitmore Global Trust was down 9%. He had stemmed the bleeding from the initial announcement, but the photo of Victoria's collapse had hemorrhaged shareholder confidence. His phone buzzed with an encrypted call. The caller ID read Bartholomew Reed, the chairman of the board, a man who had played poker with Preston's father and who viewed the company not as a business, but as a sacred institution. Preston Reed's voice was a low rumble, like stones grinding together. What in God's name is happening? I'm seeing pictures of your fiancé passed out on a hospital floor. The board is in an uproar. The morality clause in your contract is not just for decoration. It's a private matter, Bartholomew. It's being handled, Preston said, his voice a tight coil of control. It stopped being a private matter the moment you held a press conference in the hospital lobby, Reed retorted. Your grandfather's legacy clause was meant to ensure a stable, family-oriented succession. Instead, you've dragged the Whitmore name into a sordid melodrama that makes us look like villains in a cheap novel. Fix it. And fix it fast. The board has a fiduciary duty to this company, not to your personal chaos. The line went dead. Preston slammed his fist on the marble desk. The foundation of his empire was shaking, all because of one woman's infuriating refusal to be reasonable. He had tried to buy her. He had tried to publicly neutralize her. Now only one option remained: annihilation. He picked up the phone and dialed his legal team. I want her buried, he commanded. File the petition for sole custody, now. Use everything. Portray her as unstable a danger. I want the state to see her as nothing more than a malfunctioning incubator. I want my children. Back in Olivia's room, the world had shrunk to the quiet beeping of machines and the hushed voices of her visitors. They were not friends or family. They were two agents from the city's Child Protective Services. The first was Mrs. Gable, a woman in her 50s with weary eyes that had seen every imaginable shade of human desperation. The second was a younger man, Mr. Evans, who clutched a tablet and seemed to regard Olivia with a prejudged suspicion, Miss Dubois. Mrs. Gable began, her tone professionally flat. "We are here because a petition has been filed in family court by Mr. Preston Whitmore. It makes some very serious allegations." Mr. Evans chimed in, reading from his tablet. "It alleges a history of emotional instability, financial insolvency, and claims you are currently in a postpartum state that makes you incapable of safely caring for 2 premature infants with complex medical needs. It states Mr. Whitmore is prepared to offer a fully staffed in-home neonatal care unit while you reside in a small 3rd-floor walk-up apartment with no demonstrable income." Every word was a carefully crafted brick building a wall between Olivia and her children. Jenna, standing beside the bed, started to object, but Olivia raised a hand, silencing her. "A history of emotional instability?" Olivia asked, her voice quiet. "Based on what? The petition cites your irrational refusal of Mr. Whitmore's initial financial settlement as evidence of poor judgment and a potential personality disorder." Evans read without a hint of irony. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He was twisting her integrity into a symptom of madness. Mrs. Gable's eyes softened for a moment. "Ms. Dubois, what we need to know is what kind of support system you have. What is your plan for when you and the children are discharged?" Olivia's mind raced. Her plan. Her plan had been to go home, to rock her babies to sleep, to love them. She didn't have a plan for fighting a billionaire who could weaponize the very system designed to protect children. The pain in her abdomen, a constant dull ache, sharpened. She pushed herself up her muscles, screaming in protest, and swung her legs over the side of the bed. She needed to be on her feet. She needed to face them standing. Using the bed rail for support, she rose her hospital gown, doing little to hide her fragility. But her eyes were not fragile. "My plan," she began, her voice trembling, but gaining strength with every word. "My plan is to do what mothers have done for all of human history. I will feed my children. I will protect them. I will love them." Mr. Whitmore talks about his in-home medical unit. He sees them as a medical condition to be managed. He talks about his money. He sees them as a financial asset to be secured. She took a shaky step forward. "You want to know my qualifications? For the last 5 days, I have learned the specific pitch of my daughter's cry when she is hungry. I have watched my son's heart rate stabilize on the monitor when I rest my hand on his incubator and speak to him. These are things his army of nurses will never know. He wants to give them a legacy of wealth and power. I want to give them a legacy of love and compassion. He offers them a gilded cage. I am offering them a home." She looked directly at Mrs. Gable, woman-to-woman mother, to perhaps another mother. "I know I don't have his money. I know this will be a struggle. But you tell me what is truly in the best interest of the children to be raised by a staff on the payroll of a man who tried to buy them, or to be raised in the arms of the mother who fought for her very life just for the chance to meet them. You can investigate his claims, you can inspect my apartment, but you will never ever convince me that anyone on this earth could be better for them than I am." She finished breathing heavily, the effort costing her dearly. A profound silence filled the room. Mr. Evans cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Mrs. Gable held Olivia's gaze for a long moment, then gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod before turning to leave. After they were gone, Jenna rushed to help Olivia back into bed. Liv, that was incredible. It was the only thing I had left to give, Olivia whispered, exhausted. The truth. Just then, Jenna's phone rang. It was an unknown number with a prestigious Manhattan area code. She answered cautiously. Hello? A crisp, powerful female voice responded. Is this Jenna Kowalski counsel for Olivia Dubois? My name is Miranda Kane. I've just read Ronan Blake's article in the Ledger. I've spent 20 years litigating against arrogant, powerful men who think their money makes them kings. I believe Mr. Whitmore is about to receive a rather abrupt education on the limits of his power. I'd like to offer my firm's services to Ms. Dubois, pro bono. Jenna's jaw dropped. Miranda Kane wasn't just a lawyer. She was a legend, a legal pit bull known for championing women's causes and eviscerating corporate titans in court. Hope, fierce and brilliant, flooded into the room. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She had a new, powerful ally, but the weight of the fight was still immense. She had the nurse wheel her down the silent, darkened hall to the NICU. Bathed in the soft blue and green glow of the monitors, she stood between the two isolettes, a sentinel watching over her tiny, precious world. She placed a hand on each, whispering promises to the sleeping infants within. I love you, Noah. I love you, Sophie, she murmured, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry you were born into this storm, but I promise you I will never ever stop fighting for you. I will be your home. As she stood there, her phone resting in her lap vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number. Her hands trembling, she opened it. The message was short, brutal, and utterly chilling. It was from Preston. They have my eyes. They will have my name. This is not over. Olivia looked from the cold blue light of the phone screen to the warm, living glow of her children's monitors. He was right. It wasn't over, but staring at the two tiny heartbeats that were her entire world, she knew he had already lost. He was fighting for possession. She was fighting for love. And in that war, she had a strength his billions could never buy. So, what happens now? The lines have been drawn in a war that money alone cannot win. Olivia Dubois, a mother forged in the fires of betrayal and a near-death experience, stands ready to fight a global titan for the right to raise her own children. Preston Whitmore, a man who has never lost, now faces an opponent whose love is a more formidable weapon than any legal team. And at the center of it all are two innocent lives, their future hanging in the balance. Olivia's journey is a testament to the fact that true strength isn't measured in dollars, but in devotion. It's a story of resilience, of a mother's unbreakable bond, and the shocking lengths the powerful will go to secure their legacy. If Olivia's incredible fight for her children moved you, if you believe that a mother's love is the most powerful force on earth, then please show your support. Hit that like button to let us know this story resonated with you. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of the power of the human spirit. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story of unbelievable resilience and real-life drama. Your support helps us bring these powerful tales to light. Thank you for listening.